afternoon, everybody, to another edition of our initiative at PassCare to explore the latest trends in workforce management in an attempt to understand the challenges being faced by organizations and the different innovative approaches adopted by the industry at large in order to address them real time. I hope everybody had a good break over the Diwali, and I hope the blessings of the season follow into all of your homes. Today's conversation will largely be focused on the enhancement of the employee experience and to find concrete solutions for the effective management of the employee lifecycle within our organizations. I'm specifically going to address, this as a topic which I think a lot of people on this particular call will be interested in, because as per the trend, as per the poll results, 88% of our attendees are from the HR fraternity. I would like to introduce to you our panel of speakers today: Mitasha Singh, Director of People Operations at Ion Energy; Abhishek D, Global Head of Talent Acquisition at BrowserStack; Ashish Gakrey, who is the founder of HR Shapers. Thank you very, very much to each one of you for actually having been a part of our conversation today. I'm hoping that we will be able to, address some of the burning queries that we have seen time and time come up, and also in terms of also preparing a runway for how organizations are preparing a runway to cater to the challenges coming up in what I presume is going to be a very, very challenging year in 2023. Okay, so we will kick things off. We noticed that quite a few of our attendees are people who have joined our initiative earlier. So you will know the regular trend. Please park your queries here itself. We would appreciate if you could also leave your email addresses while you address our query to our panelists. In the middle of the conversation itself, if there is an insightful point you would like to add, or if there's something that requires to be immediately addressed, I will, of course, ask them the same question and it'll get addressed real time. If not, if it's a very specific question which they will not be able to break, their existing NDAs with your organizations, they will write to you separately. We will ensure that those questions are parked to them. They have already been informed about this, and they have graciously agreed also to be able to address those questions directly to you. So while you leave your questions, we request you to also please leave your email addresses, just in case we either run out of time or we are not able to get those answers to you live during this conversation itself. Okay, so we'll kickstart our set of questions that we immediately want to address today. And let me ask the most burning question that probably, considering PassCare as an organization works a lot with people function teams across the country, we consistently hear about the problem of the Great Resignation, which I think is primarily there on everybody's mind over this year. The year began with the Great Resignation, and now with the weight of the economic downturn in most organizations and in the globe, in the global scenario, a lot of organizations are trying to address this as a burning query, like they need to get a hang of it. So in recent times, in order to be more cost efficient, organizations are ensuring that the focus is largely on employee retention. Earlier, there was a huge amount of exposure towards the idea of talent acquisition, but now there is a lot more focus on employee retention and employee experience. What are your thoughts about this? I'll start with Abhishek. Abhishek, I'll pass this query to you first.
Sure, and thank you for having me. It's great to be spending Thursday afternoon talking about this, and which is actually fairly close to my heart, given that I've been in the middle of blitzscaling an organization where talent acquisition was front and center, to a point now where we are looking to consolidate and ensure that people stay with us and are engaged and are doing meaningful work. So I think a lot of focus now, and when you talk about employee experience, really, it's not just about, it's also about the promise that is made during recruiting and how that promise is really catered to once the rubber hits the road, person joins the organization. So right from the post-offer engagement to someone joining in, the onboarding process, and every touch point that an employee would undergo, whether the promise made during recruiting is really kept. I think that's a major part of an employee experience. And that's a major part of an employee descent as well, because people who join a company for the uh, external sort of persona of the company, and in case the internal policies, practices, ways of work do not necessarily live up to that, it is a fair bit of dissonance.
I'll use that as an exact point. In fact, about your point about dissonance, to pivot to probably Mitasha. Mitasha, are you actually seeing the same trend?
Yes, Soumya. So firstly, thank you. Welcome, everyone. And very nice to be speaking to all of you on a weekday, wanting to discuss how to better employee experience. I do think TA, to go back to your previous question, the TA has been front and center because we hear of a lot of scaling and hyper growth. And that's where, a lot of media attention or attention on writing and ops and processes come into play. But I do think employee experience has always been front and center for organizations that have managed to sustainably grow and create meaningful experiences, whether it's much larger organizations or just very early stage startups. Yes, there is a certain amount of dissonance that people now do feel, and I think it's always been the case. It's just the fact that people now have a lot more opportunity and freedom to express it. So everyone's a reviewer, right? Everyone's on social media, everyone has a voice. There's Glassdoor, there's just the gig economy that's coming in. So I think it's just that it's an empowerment of being able to say that right now. I think the dissonance has always been there, and that authenticity is something that has never been replaced. So good brands and organizations who've understood that you have to walk the talk and not just sell things. It's like sales and after sales support, right? You can't just be selling it once and for all. So I think it's just the fact that we are hearing about it a lot more, and there's a lot of TikTok reels and memes, and we're coming up with a lot of catchy words and nuances to phrases, but it's always been the case. I think employee experience has always been front and center.
I think I will pivot on your point and actually talk about this great phenomenon which I am petrified of, that everyone talks about, quiet quitting. And I'm like, we need to have an engaged workforce, especially with the amount of time and effort that goes into employee attraction and talent management and managing their needs while they're with our organization. And this whole idea of either lying flat or just quiet quitting is horrendous. And like someone like me who's only responsible for the business end of a deliverable, I wouldn't actually know how to actually address it's a real-time problem. At the end of the day, it's going to have an effect on my balance sheet. So I probably need to pick the brains of HR professionals to actually be able to give the right kind of solution for something of that sort. Ashish, I will pivot now to you. You of course, because of the kind of nature of organization you have, you work with a lot of organizations, right? Are you seeing this as a general trend, across the industry at the moment?
For being me there, and thanks Pechcare for arranging this good topic. See what's happening, disruption is taking place, destruction is taking place. On a serious note, we don't know how many days being passed when the Ukraine and Russia war is started. It's almost more than 6 months. Okay, one side something is happening, another side something is happening. Lot of development at the same time it is taking place, right? Look at what's happening in the talent acquisition, like we are talking about quitting now, right? Which can be advanced version of great resignation. People are just leaving the job. They don't know for what they are living. Some of them, they are saying they are finding the purpose. They want to go for XYZ the reason, and most of them without knowing why they are leaving, right? Considering this for a big problem for an employer, for a workforce, for a organization, actually, they are looking at, okay, how do I retain first of all? Okay, to retain, obviously, you need to focus on the employee experience. Even to large extent, Abhishek, I think candidate became an employee for an organization, right? The way the treatment is given from the, they apply for a position. Okay, look at the timeline for filling up the application form be reduced. Number of interviews being reduced, the timeline, the managers, how far they close the position and all. So lot of initiative companies taking place, and then we are talking about the gig model here. We are not limited to only one place, the recruitment that you need to be there in the office for, selection purpose and all. Company recruiting from any place. So that's where the digitalization also taking place in a big way, that how do I create an infrastructure ecosystem so that, any position should be closed. Or as far as employees are concerned, everything should be there for a on touch point and screen and all, right? Then there is a hybrid model we are talking about. At the same time, we are struggling. Okay, how do we call the employee at home office? Yeah, I haven't seen the kind of budget being approved just to call them to office. We are saying, okay, let's give the goodies and all. So these are not lollipop, I would call it, but employer has realized, first of all, I need to take care of my existing pool also, so that they should not go out anywhere, right? Moonlighting, we are seeing the industry difference viewpoint. You have seen two employers, they are saying, I want to oppose. I'm
Right.
taking the employee. At the same time, two employers are saying, guys, I have policy, my employees can work. So look at, you as an organization can lose a talent to XYZ company, which is actually
Of course.
moonlighting, right? And it remind me, Abhishek and Mitasha, I don't know, and Soumya also, we used to go for a design thinking workshop. Okay, let's go for design thinking and let's understand what are the touch points for employee. Okay, are we touching first of all? If we are touching, how we are touching, why we are touching, is it going to them, whatever you are doing? So design thinking comes to in my mind when we talk about the employee life cycle and employee experience. I will pause here considering that.
Let that low though.
Yeah.
Okay, Ashish, considering what you're talking about, creating the infrastructure itself for and how essential it is in order to maintain, a robust workforce, or what they understand as a goodie is very, very different. I think I'll actually park my question directly to you, Mitasha. I recollect from an earlier conversation with the HR leader who mentioned the intangible value of a great corporate culture. And then he proceeded to list, flexible timings, team outings, annual days, even social responsibility policies, like making an office space paperless, or creating an initiative for a plastic-free zone in the office, or health initiatives itself. Let's get moving kind of campaigns and all of that. And then he proceeded to reflectively add that developing and maintaining a company culture was an easier task in the years past, when we would have large groups of our workforce working out of specific office locations. But as we all know, the last 2 to 3 years have completely challenged that very idea and made it impossible in a lot of ways. So we have companies that have gone hybrid, companies that are still remote. How complex is the process of creating a culture, in such an atmosphere? And what exactly, according to you, determines the need for such a culture?
Sure. Interesting. I think we can do an entire, 2-hour meet on just remote, hybrid, and culture creation. But I will try and sum it up quickly based on the kind of inputs you've, had the pleasure of learning from this leader that you spoke to. I think, look, a culture is just nothing but a living, breathing assimilation of every person that exists in an organization, right? Typically, when any org starts out at a smaller scale, it is driven primarily top down, because founders and their culture and their ethos will trickle down into the kind of people they bring in, and then it takes a fabric. It takes almost like a shape and form of its own, because it becomes larger than who those top 3, 5, 10 people are, right? Eventually, it's hundreds of people, thousands of people that make up cultures. And within culture, there are micro cultures. Like you can see a people team and an engineering team and a sales team can sometimes in an organization have cohesive values when it's well done. Cohesive values, but still very different and distinct microcultures. Whereas when it's not well done and there is no cohesion, it's just completely manager dependent. So you end up with a great leader and a very people-friendly person, and that microculture is amazing. And then maybe in another team, it's a very toxic culture. So I think culture is nothing but just the amalgamation of people trying to get together better. I don't think most organizations are really remote or remote first at all. We were all driven to it per force during pandemic. So most of us have not even been trained on what our remote culture is. So when you talk about hybrid and remote, there is no such thing as a good culture in remote or a bad culture in remote. I think it's just very, very skills dependent. I think it's extremely complex to bring up people who are not used to async communication, who are not used to writing things, who are not used to working very well with FOMO and differences in time zones and that kind of flexibility. And I think we are being very fast to judge the whole this is great and this is not great, because as a generation we've look at what we've created, right? Like our leaders, or the early, at least in the startup world, we've created people who've gone to college personally, who've just been in extracurriculars, and they've done a lot of enterprising things in person. And then we suddenly expect people of 25 to 40-year-old to just change and let go of control and start living our lives virtually. That is just another skill set. So those who were always attuned to discipline, very autonomous, non-micromanaging kind of cultures, and a slower, more process-driven pace of life have created fantastic cultures in a remote and hybrid setup. I think those of us who've probably been more extroverted, have had more tight control, have had to be in person to be able to manage that ship really well, have not managed to scale well. So it is less complex. It's got more to do with the skills that people bring to the table. And I think as long as we are cognizant that there are certain people who are fit for remote and certain who are not, that's just it. That's just fine. As long as we don't have to be one or the other. I think as long as people leaders can identify that remote does not work for everyone, hybrid will not work for everyone, and be okay with that. There's enough types of people in the world who are introverts, who are extroverts, who prefer one over the other, and we'll all find the right kind of talent.
Perfect. Mitasha, I think this is probably something I'm going to remember for a while, that, I don't think I spend my larger portion of my career speaking with people, function, leaders, and I think I've never actually heard somebody say that we were never trained. This is just a challenge that we were all just thrown into, and I don't think anyone was ever trained to actually understand the challenge of a hybrid work model, because this was a large-scale experiment that the world had to, if you had to survive, you had to mandatorily take it up.
Just to add there, like the purists, the remote work purists, I kind of feel like, your Buffers and Zapiers and GitLabs of the world, I feel for them, because they've, the movement's been superb. It's been very small, but it's been brilliant. And I think just calling this remote is doing disservice to that entire, movement that was created and really passionately propounded. And it does a lot of good to a lot of people. So I think we just need to accept not everyone's cut for it, and it's fine.
I will actually use your point to actually pivot to somebody who comes from Abhishek. This question, I think, was made for you. With the culture of, a Microsoft, a LinkedIn, and an Uber behind you, you massive US organizations who focus so much on the idea of just creating a robust office culture. And thankfully, because I've had the privilege of speaking and knowing some of these people, actually understand the amount of focus and initiatives that happen in the office space. Like from early morning breakfast onwards to the 4 o'clock fresh fruit counter. I'm aware of a lot of the initiatives that a lot of these organizations have. Now you're actually in a hyper growth, organization where you are now designing the entire culture, and that too at a very, very complicated time in the world. So what are your thoughts about this?
Sure. Thank you for that question. It's interesting what Mitasha mentioned, and probably I would like to take a step back and break it down further for the audience as well. Obviously, you have your pure in-office sort of setups. You have hybrid, you have remote. And then you have those companies which had to go remote and now either have figured where they're doing a roto, return to office, or they are still figuring whether they should return to office amidst mass resignations, etc. Right? So it is a slightly complex thing rather than just broad brushing it as either remote or hybrid or in person. We were one of those companies, and this is a little bit of a hark back at 2021 September. Actually, we were a remote. We were forced to go remote. Prior to that, we were very office focused, and I think most startups which are innovating and having to build something felt the need to do that in person. right? Huddled over whiteboards and so on. And we were no different. A product which was built in India, scaling globally, it had to require that amount of camaraderie, collaboration, etc. COVID happened. From a very, very office-focused setup, we had to go remote, and there was no choice. If we had a choice, we would have still come to office, right? And that's when we started pivoting to ways of work around async communication, using Confluence a lot, documentation, and it wasn't an easy transition. There were people who may have been great performers, became a little bit of laggards. They felt that, hey, they're spending a lot of productive time doing just documentation versus actual work. We had to do a lot of hand holding, and the founders had to do a lot of hand holding with individuals, saying that this is work as well, right? Async communication is just as important. Otherwise, you'll end up like initially, my calendar used to be blocked for 15-minute slots apart from the regular times, so just for simple decisions to be made, which could have probably happened in person, just in passing, would require a calendar block. And that's a immense drain on time, and a lot of this was taken care of through frameworks that were created. And like Mitasha very rightly said, people who like autonomy, like a fair bit of responsibility and ability to take responsibility for their actions, etc., would thrive in a setup like this, because you have a set framework, you know what to do, right? You decide, you move on. Probably keep people informed rather than wait for approvals, right? It is a massive change in ways of work. It is not necessarily that and otherwise in remote, you'd spend forever to get one approval in if you have to go through the entire chain of command. 2021 September, we decided to go remote as a policy. So back then, the pandemic wasn't necessarily at its peak. Companies were calling people back. We had the case study of companies like a GitLab, etc., which were born remote. And hence we decided to go remote with a caveat that we'll go remote first. So that's where the social capital building came into play. So given the blitz scale that we were in, we felt that being remote will give us great access to talent and also will help in retaining talent and fit for purpose talent, right? The sort of talent that we need, blurring of borders and all of that. That said, we also understood that need of having the social capital built, and which is where the quarterly syncs were built in. So, which is why I said remote first and not only remote, because every quarter the teams would come together, either functionally or cross-functionally, to align on goals, to take stock of how things are going, to celebrate together, get to know each other, go back and then work in their own homes or home offices. And the policies also need to be reflective of that. Now, if we were to just lift and shift the policies that worked really well for us in a in-office setting to a remote setting, it won't work. So there were certain things that we did around that as well. So in the spirit of transparency and people being able to manage the time, etc., we said, okay, fine, we'll launch unlimited time off. So it's not really capped at a certain, and it's public news, so I can share that. So unlimited time off, and it's been great. People take responsibility for the work that they do. They get that flexibility as well in terms of how they go about doing it. Secondly, the entire thing around, are people set up well for working remotely, because that then became a policy decision. So what do we reimburse, what we don't, right? It's no longer a matter of necessity, it became a policy piece, right? So what do we reimburse, what do we not? So in that entire reimbursement thing, we also threw in something around if someone were to book like a WeWork, etc., for collaboration in the city, doesn't necessarily have to be in a headquarters. That possibility was thrown in as well, right? So there were those platforms made available and choices given to people in terms of how they would want to engage, how they can do their best possible work. But as a broad-based framework, we said that we'll go remote first. Sorry, long-winded answer to a short question.
No, absolutely. It's not about a long-winded answer. The idea is to actually be able to touch on as many points as possible. And I like the idea that, you have also taken into account people who have restrictions in terms of working from home. Like if you have,
Yeah.
if you live with the larger family, then, working from home is a very difficult prospect, especially catering to the needs of, either a very old population or a very, very young, population at home. So considering those constraints, and I believe this could be the evolution of what the hybrid workforce is, that you have tie-ups with WeWork, and employees can actually go and use their facilities also if they need to step out of the house and do because the idea is to retain talent as much as possible. This cannot become one of the reasons why that employee then starts searching for an alternative option. Ashish, I will come to you with a very specific thing. We've heard largely about the culture query here, right? So from what I'm understanding, culture has got to do with a lot of creating of a positive employee experience. What are the practical keys that for enabling such a positive employee experience?
So some of the thing we need to take care is more to do with, and these are not the like rocket science, or these are not the new things which we are talking about. Every organization has been working. Some of them they are working effectively, some of them they are not. Like communication is the key, transparency is the key, belongingness is the key. Like how do we create the ecosystem which will be for everyone? Okay. Looking at the COVID and what has happened, during the COVID, post COVID, all the information which is being made available for everybody to access, which were not there, right? There are a lot of tools which are being developed. Okay, company going for automation, right, left, and center, right? So that employee can be easily available to do anything. Employee can read anything and everywhere, and everything can be recorded and all this, so that it is there actually for an organization. This is also more to do with, how do we really reach out to the employee for a XYZ purpose, which is like manager reaching to employee, leadership reaching to manager, leadership reaching to employee, right? Or employee is going to access XYZ information while working from, home or hybrid. Yeah. We never thought that, company will come up with the allowances, which will be given for a home office setup. I will send you the, $5,000, or perhaps, I will send you XYZ. Okay, just put up your laptop over there, the bandwidth connection, the Wi-Fi and all. I mean, these are the small things which are creating a, kind of meaningful connection. We have seen discussion on the WhatsApp. What is the policy for XYZ? What is the outer limit of this policy, right? Because this is the thing. I mean, if you multiply, if there is a large organization, it really make a difference over there. So empowerment is another thing which I can say is really playing very important role. Well-being, wellness, employee engagement. What has happened during the COVID, Mitasha and Abhishek, you must have realized also that we know the family member name today, right? How many people there in the employee family? Okay, right, which was not the case earlier. Even earlier, what was the case? Leadership or our boss, which can be CHR or anybody, were saying, do you know how many members in the employee family? Perhaps we, not as a HR, but even as a manager, may not be knowing. But today we know how many people there in the employee family. You can easily build up a connection. You can easily talk to the employee, kind of feel and touch, right? Instead of how are you doing? What I mean to say, okay, how are you doing? What are you doing? And also, these are the really communication platform which are creating a kind of belongingness, the culture of the very well feeling and all, touch and feel and all. Beside this, digitalization is the key also. If you don't have anything which is there in the place, then employee will feel not connected with anybody else. Even recently, like Diwali celebration, you must have seen the way company is gone to the celebrate the festival season. I never saw in the last 5 or 10 years. Yeah. The company which might be fighting with the budget earlier, they have gone, one step ahead and let's say, let's do it. This may be part of the culture now they are building and all. And this can be one of the strategy. Let's call them to the office. Yeah. So there can be many more purpose behind this all. Then diversity is another part, equity, inclusion, feedback, conversation, open house. Another point I'd like to say before I end up, we have never seen the kind of what do you call it is leadership meeting, the kind of open house which were taking place. Today, leadership and CEO and CHRO and everybody at the high level, they like to talk and share the information what's happening more frequent than the earlier. And sometimes it's very difficult, Soumya, that because you 1% as a population in the office, another percent as a population somewhere else, and that then you don't know which kind of people coming to the organization, the way recruitment is taking place. One culture may not be fit to all. Can you create a personalized culture, customized culture? So it's really big challenging task for HR to decide which kind of culture I need to create. Or do employee need a culture? They just need a good job profile, tool to work on this, appreciation, recognition, give me the salary, give me some support. That's all.
Ashish, you have touched on something which I think is a very, very critical thing. And, probably this is the advantage of actually talking specifically to people function professionals. Culture then becomes, a subset of things like you're talking about. We look at what's the company culture, but you're talking about a system for recognitions, a system for, well-being, a system for, having you created the facilities and, for an entire organization as a whole. And then also to cater to, a smaller subset, like probably, do you have, things that are you cognizant about the requirements of, say, working parents? Like schools have again started. Children are not, studying from home anymore. They've all started going to school. Those kinds of things. Are you at least cognizant of, the diversity that exists in your own workforce? And I think those kinds of, key points actually then go into largely building up culture.
One more point. What has happened during the COVID? Most of the initiative company has taken because other have taken. Right. Now company need to decide what they can continue sustain with.
Correct. So this is something that we are seeing largely because as an organization, we are integrated into a lot of our client systems. We are seeing that, at the height of COVID or just when, they had to go remote, they took initiatives and they probably brought in a CRM into their system because they didn't have a CRM tool. They did not have a talent management tool. They did not have a HRMS tool separately, and because it was the need of the hour, they all ended up in choosing a particular partner and they onboarded a company. But now, as we are because we handle employee benefits and we are integrated into a lot of our clients' systems, one of our biggest requirement at the moment is we are changing our partner for HRMS. So a lot of them are actually relooking at the HRMS, if it is required for them right now. As our organization also, we have also changed a couple of sales tools because we brought in a sales tool. It's not working for us at the moment, or we took a rush decision and we're having to relook at those tools. And of course, the viability test is very important if it is still relevant today, considering we are again relooking at our, our entire workforce setup. So then I think, Mitasha, will come to you. Very few companies, if I'm right, regularly keep a check on the effectiveness of their initiatives and the impact it is then having on their employees. This is a very specific question. What are the metrics that you used in order to measure the EX, employee experience in an employee life cycle?
Sure. So I think this question will also broadly, I think a lot of folks do, some version of a ESAT survey or, some version of an onboarding survey, etc. While I think scale is a big determinant in this, equation. I do think like maybe comfort with which I'll be able to talk about slightly smaller organizations. Abhishek can touch and Ashish can touch more upon the larger organizations. I think the broad fundamentals remain the same, right? You'd want to measure some metric of how your onboarding experience is going, your candidate experience as an applicant was, your, so Ashish said something very, very nice about design thinking and looking at touch points. So all you need to do is when you want to craft an EX strategy, when you want to operationalize, high level thinking into actual impact of how you can measure EX is just to think of some touch points. So what I'd like to tell people who are just starting out is do not overwhelm yourself and think of the 100 touch points that can exist. just streamline and then go from there. So a very mature, nuanced organization can look at 50 parameters. Whereas if you want to start small, just start with, say, one part of recruiting, which is important. So whether it's your applicant experience, interview experience, some part of that, little bit of onboarding, little bit of, the journey. So whether it's career progression, how fast people get promoted, are you happy with your manager? Just pick one important aspect of, your employee life cycle. And very important would be exit and alumni as well, because, that's eventually, especially in the tech industry we are in today, everyone's kind of rotating, everyone's all over the place. We're all networking. Everyone really knows what the real deal with an org is, especially, in the tech community. You know when someone's nice and when someone's like just spending a lot of money on branding. So it's very apparent these days, right? So pick certain things that make sense to you. Personally, I am a big believer in, and again, this is something that a lot of people, ops practitioners, do not believe in. So slightly controversial in that case, but I am a big believer in revenue per employee as an overarching metric. Again, of course, taking a lot of these scores in mind. So I don't mean be your slave driver and your revenue per employee metric needs to go up. But to me, I think if you're maintaining attrition, if you're maintaining ESAT scores, if you're maintaining some of these scores that you're trying to manage, whether it's onboarding, career progressions, giving people a great exit experience, and your revenue per employee kind of, climbs up, that to me is like a well-engaged organization. It doesn't really matter whether, you're doing brilliantly well and winning awards or not. As long as there are certain fundamentals that are sorted, I think that's an engaged organization.
Okay. I think I'll send the question your way itself, Abhishek. I think Mitasha already did that. What are the metrics that you see that because we all understand the effectiveness, and here I will, probably bring my element here and say, I'm also a part of an organization where the people function team and, the team at large creates an initiative. Sometimes they want us to, are you working more, or, how's your, mental well-being doing? Because we're considering we're a financial organization, we're moving into very, very difficult quarters now. The pressure is going to be intense. So they've actually started a campaign to see, but then how do you then go about measuring the effectiveness of said, in employee experience initiative? Because at the end of the day, the job is a difficult one. So the experience of having to do this is going to be a difficult time. We're already prepared for that. But then how different organizations manage you differently at that particular period. So how do you then go about managing the effectiveness of one of these initiatives? I'm sorry.
No, sure. So and I've seen this happen differently in different places. We are a very metric-driven organization currently at BrowserStack. So with this, whenever we set out to do an initiative, there is a North Star metric that we have in mind that we want to move. Right? We would not do it post facto. We would know what we want to really impact and then try and see whether that's moved or not. For example, if I'm doing an initiative around employee engagement, wellness, etc., there's a net promoter score survey that will go out. And we don't necessarily do it quarterly or whatever. We do it on whenever we need to do a check-in. Right, so we moved away from doing it a half yearly or a quarterly sort of a survey. Currently, given that the tool that we have allows managers to create their own surveys and push out, it just becomes very easy for me to get the pulse of the team as quickly and as real time as I can. Secondly, I think what Mitasha talked about around alums. So we actually have a metric around boomerang. And so we call them boomerangs. Even back at LinkedIn, we used to have a metric around that, what percentage of our open roles would be filled by boomerangs. And that's a very strong metric because people have been here, have liked the culture, else they would not necessarily want to come back, right? So it tells a really strong story. So we call it back at stack at BrowserStack, call different names, different places. The initial 90 days, and there have been books written about the first 90 days. So we track infant attrition very closely. And especially in a remote setting, that becomes a very important metric for us, right? So whether the hire is a good culture fit in terms of our ways of working. There's no right or wrong in the context of BrowserStack as a remote organization. And there are there are things that we can do to make that better. So within that broad ambit, there are multiple initiatives moving. So we would not necessarily look at an attribution to each initiative, but we would want to see whether the overall metric of infant attrition is coming down. Right? So those would be some of the things in addition to what Mitasha covered quite extensively.
Okay, thanks, Abhishek. Abhishek, I think I will come back to you. We are going to build on this. I think this is a good point for us to actually, expand on a little more. So Ashish, I think we'll do it this way that, Ashish can address this and then Mitasha, and then we will come back to Abhishek because I want to elaborate on this point a little more. Considering the backdrop of the pandemic, and we spoke a lot earlier, right? A lot of organizations adopted technology rapidly to manage most people function deliverables, especially because the people function team is responsible for the pulse of the workforce itself. So this calls for a direct question about technology and how much of a role has it played? We know it's substantial, but how much of a role has it played in the management of the employee life cycle? Where are we with it? Do you have any specific recommendations? Because last time we had one of these conversations, a couple of people had very interesting tools to recommend, and we ended up in having a lot of engagement from people in the conversation also about those tools. And according to you, is there any aspect of the people function spectrum where technology is still rather underutilized? Ashish, I think I will start with you.
Yeah. So see, automation, digitalization is just like Excel. Excel only 10%, while you haven't touched upon 90%. And believe me, even if you touch upon 25%, your productivity will jump like this. And all the automation and digitalization tool like this, it has a lot of features. The only thing either we are not able to explain, okay, what are the features, or employee not able to use it when it is required. Yeah. So it is made for employee, it is made for the workplace, so that productivity can be increased. Remember what used to happen during the COVID? We were struggling to get the even address of the employee because most of the organizations, they didn't have the database because they haven't initiated all this kind of thing. Even in the basic Excel, what I mean to say, those kind of culture were not there. Okay, can we have a checklist ABCD? Right? With the ABCD, can we create a discipline? Okay, with the discipline, can it be kind of intimation, reminder and all? Because see, one person or 10 people in the HR cannot look after everything every time, always. System has to be there. So like coexistence of the digitalization, automation has to be there. Now look at the entire life cycle of the digitalization or HR tools, right? Today, all the HRMS, since topic is related to the employee experience, all the HRMS tool, they are expanding their reach out. Okay, I also have a employee experience tool. It is not only limited to only the database. They are also adding, okay, either I will add upon, I will create my own, or I will integrate with somebody. So they are also saying, okay, can I provide a one end-to-end solution for the organization? So this is how. And then we talk about, if you look at the life cycle again, you talk about the BGV, ATS, LMS, employee engagement, employee experience, then wellness, well-being. During the COVID, only wellness and well-being industry boom like anything. We have seen the kind of, the request which they have got it, the kind of company they have come up, they have got so many VC funding and all. And today it's become a need of the hour, not only in India, but worldwide. So wellness is also created in a multiple category. Okay, I need to look after physical wellness, then mental wellness, then social wellness, then financial wellness. Okay, and you will not believe, I was attending one conference, and then there was an award ceremony where they were giving a presentation. Even the policy formulation, I have XYZ policy which are the normal in HR, they are making it as a part of the wellness. So the thought process is completely changed. Can I make the policy which is actually user friendly for everyone? Policy, we always think, okay, let's do the policy which is more of discipline oriented and the control mechanism and all. Can it be something like this which is good for everyone to follow? It reminds me of the like in the conversation we are talking about, how do we understand the employee experience, pulse and all, and employee engagement. Modometer is another thing, Every day in the morning, you are being, asked to click on the one of the icon, mojos, okay, you are feeling happy, not happy and all, then accordingly HR guy will reach out to you and say, boss, I hope everything is okay and all. Yeah. So digitalization is still I tell you, for the next 5 years, entire industries will be busy with the digitalization. There are many more new things are coming up. Even we haven't touched 100%.
Then I'll probably pivot and ask Abhishek and Mitasha, which aspect of people function do you think technology has not penetrated enough yet? Because I know leave management system and payroll system and all of that is largely digitalized these days. What are the underutilized sections of the people function spectrum?
I'll probably take a stab at it, Mitasha, if that's okay with you. All right. So again, I'll answer this in two parts, right? One, like Ashish said, there's a whole host of stuff, and probably the function that I'm in is the most abused in terms of digitization and technology, etc. But the biggest piece is how useful is it to the users, right? And how well is it being used? You may have a fantastic HRMS, but if it's not giving you the desired results, then it's of no use, right? So that's one, right? So being able to adapt to that change, manage that change, and ensure that because it is a massive, depending on what you're really implementing, it can be a massive change management program, right? For example, we're just fresh off a Workday implementation, and it's been draining in the least, right? So across modules. So from that standpoint, it is as good as you make it out to be. Whether you've designed your business processes well enough, then it can work for you or not. Specifically, areas that I've not necessarily seen a lot of technology or automation around, one is recognition. Rewards, yes, there is a fair bit, but not necessarily recognition. There are standalone platforms, but not necessarily integrated in an overall HRMS. Second, potentially around innovation, especially for remote organizations. How do you really simulate? And there are possibilities with metaverse, etc. How do you simulate an in-person brainstorming session so that it makes it immersive and engaging for people to actually ideate? That could be another. And Microsoft has started doing it. I think Accenture has started doing it, and they're obviously large organizations implementing that will probably be torchbearers for others to follow suit. So those two would be the broad areas. On engagement, and this is something that we are struggling with, water cooler conversations. Again, sorry, most of my problem statements are in the context of remote or remote first. Because us going remote, the water cooler is taken out of the scenario, right? And most of the very interesting culture building, bonding, camaraderie building used to happen at the coffee machine or the water cooler or the cafeteria. How do we remotely really simulate that? That again, there are some very interesting platforms that we've looked at, but they are not as immersive yet. So that could be another area. So those would be my three.
Perfect. Abhishek, unknowingly, you have ended up in answering one of the questions that one of our attendees has answered. Kasturi Balakrishna of Tech Solution had actually asked employee engagement in a remote setup. Apart from static communication, what are the other creative ways to engage a diversified workforce? But we're telling technology is still largely yet to penetrate that sector. It's a space where there is need for improvement. I will, of course, take on another question that we have from one of our attendees, and this I think I'll park to you, Mitasha. When we talk about the employee, Gunita Singh asks, when we talk about employee experience, I want to know how can we ensure similar employee experience for employees working on the field versus working remotely, or retaining them for that matter?
Okay. I think firstly, Abhishek, he mostly covered everything I wanted to say. And I do think just the one thing I'd like to add to that, which is also something that answers a little bit of your question. I think there is an overwhelming amount of tech apps and platforms now that solve for every single aspect of what we think about remote and hybrid challenges. It's just that like Abhishek mentioned, they're not cohesive with each other. So for larger organizations, of course, you wouldn't want to have 35 different apps, just trying to solve one part of the problem. So it's not a large scale problem that's now been solved at an enterprise level. If any of you are at slightly more smaller to mid-scale organization, I think, you think of it and there is a solution that exists. Just go on to Product Hunt and you'll have a field day. So whether it's, solving for, just serendipitous conversations, like he said, water cooler conversations, or just, trying to figure if we can recreate some kind of an office environment and, more casual collisions is an app on called Donut on Slack. So there are a lot of these extensions and a lot of these small, beautiful things that are being done. It's just that it is extremely hard to solve that at an enterprise level, naturally, because, just of the scale and because the systems don't speak to one another. So how do you ensure parity? I think one of the most important things that I tell my team as well, especially in a hybrid workforce, is that tech is an enabler. Tech is not the solution. I think we forget as HR professionals and just like people, we are obsessed with data now. Everyone's obsessed with analytics. We've forgotten that to keep things simple. Tech is eventually a problem solver and an enabler to empower things. But as soon as we shift that focus to, are we going to get the right tech to do the right things? And, we are so enamored with analytics now and data-driven decision making that we've forgotten what we were out to achieve, right? So we can do a longer session and conversation and people can write to us individually or on LinkedIn, about tech for different areas that are underutilized. Each of us can pitch in with the platforms that we like or we would recommend and shine some focus on them. But the one thing I would like to tell everyone is that I think the rate of success and participation is just as important. So as long as technology can solve for 2-3 things, which you'd also agree, Soumya, especially with Pascal, what are we trying to do? We're not reinventing the wheel. All we're trying to do is making sure that the user experience for any of these items, right, whether it's a payroll platform, engagement platform, a benefits platform, is something that you'd want to open. So even as HR professionals 10 years ago, I would probably not want to use most of these tools because it was just such a horror to load, right? Right now, most of it is just solving for that problem. Is the user experience fantastic? Are things being done fast enough? Is it easy and fun to use? It's just that. So as long as you can break it down for a hybrid workforce the similar way, that it's so easy to do things in office, can I do something very similar with my hybrid folks or with my remote folks? And the participation increases. That's all you need to know. So you can use something as simple as free Airtable to automate things and just load it up with Zapier and your automations will work. You can use free apps. You can just go on to Product Hunt, check out what the platforms offer and use the simplistic version of that. You can use, social media and Instagram strategies and bring that onto your internal Slack communication channel or whatever people use, and it won't become static communication. It will become an interactive thing. You can use wellness calendars and just team challenges, small breakouts, right? So today Zoom and Google and everyone else has these breakout rooms. So there are a lot of things that, all we need to think is, again, going back to Ashish's point on design thinking, there are certain things that worked in the offline world. All of those things will work in the online world with modifications. And if we put enough effort into modifying it, it'll work. It just needs a lot of thought about people and not necessarily start out with what success means. Success only comes once you build on it.
Perfect. I think we will take the last question of the day. Benson, your question is actually the lead for our next conversation. Our next conversation is going to be with the CHROs of Dunzo, Mindtickle, Vedantu, and Flipkart. I request all of you to please attend. It is specifically going to be about 2023 and whether moonlighting should actually be brought in as a policy. So that's the little topic of an entire conversation for November. So I will actually take another question. And this I will, of course, address to Ashish. Ashish, should we concentrate more on a personalized culture building for A, remote working lovers, and B, office working lovers? I've never quite heard it put that way.
Okay, so this is more to do with whether, remote working hours or office level working hours. But what is coming out from the question is, more to do with the culture, values and all, right? If I'm not wrong, right? So again, we need to understand which kind of population we are dealing with. What are their aspirations? okay, from where they are coming, and where they want to go, right? So there are various things we need to first of all identify, then do something accordingly. There is no shortcut or there is no ready-made solution for this, considering the kind of population we are dealing with. And the gig model is also saying that tomorrow your population will be very diversified. Today we are saying 75% population is generation, new generation, we can call it, right? But with the gig workforce, you might have more experienced people, may not be in the office, but they may be part of your organization headcount. So it's not only one way you look at it. You need to look at the holistic approach and see, which kind of solution I can provide. Do I need to give everything for everyone? Is it not possible also? You can't make everybody happy every time and all. There has to be some time, borderline, okay, let's fully stop. Do we need those kind of people? You look at which kind of business you are into, which kind of problem you are solving. Because there is a different industries, they may not need all this. And there is an industry which may need all this kind of workforce. Yeah. So identification, assessment is most important. Accordingly, we can build upon. There is no ready-made formula. Yes, some of the company they are already doing. And then those policies and those benefits, privilege are, you never heard about it, right? Like dating allowances, I have heard, diverse allowance we have heard, right? So there are various kind of things somebody can think of, but yes, go with the flow and look at what's happening, what your organization need is, and then accordingly decide.
Perfect. Thank you, Ashish. I think I'll take that as my a window to actually thank our 4 panelists. Ashish, Abhishek, and Mitasha, thank you so very much. First of all, for having made your time available on a week full of festivities, and secondly, for being so candid and honest. An old mentor of mine, I remember once telling me that the most generous thing you can actually share, the most important thing you can actually be most generous with is knowledge, because it will not only prevent one person, but probably down the line 1,000 people from making mistakes. So thank you so much for your generosity. I hope everybody, I was a student on this conversation. I got to hear and learn so much from each one of you. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us, Soumya.
Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.